Module 4 of the course, Introduction to Tribal Consultations. By the end of this module, you will be able to identify and describe best practices for planning, preparing, conducting, and closing out tribal consultations. Your agency's tribal consultation policy should have a defined process for initiating a tribal consultation, but here are some best practices to follow in planning, preparing, conducting, and closing out a tribal consultation.
Planning. Determine if tribal consultation is appropriate. This was discussed at length in Module 3. Remember, you are still encouraged to engage in tribal consultation even if it is determined that a policy will not have tribal implications but is of interest to a tribe or tribes. If consultation is determined to be appropriate, identify the proper participants, i.e., other possible agencies and the necessary or key federal and tribal decision makers. This was discussed in Module 1. Plan to conduct tribal consultation as early as possible in the agency decision-making process and as often as needed. This was discussed in both Module 2 and 3. Determine dates, times, and locations that are mutually agreeable and give as much advance notice as possible. Generally, agencies should plan for a minimum of 30 days advance notice. Here, you should remember that tribal leaders are very busy and engaging in tribal consultation comes at the cost to tribal nations. So, be sure to make the engagement count. Plan the logistics, i.e., presenters, venue, court reporter, audio/video, etc. Allow for a written comment period following the consultation of at least 30 days. The agency should also identify how tribal nations can submit written comments. If there are time constraints such that 30 days notice of consultation is not possible, or that the post-consultation written comment period must be shorter than 30 days, the notice of consultation should include information as to why the standard notice or written comment period cannot be provided, upon the request of a tribe, or where it would serve tribal interests or fulfill certain trust obligations to tribal nations. Agencies should consider adjusting deadlines for notice of consultations and for accepting written comments.
Preparing. Invite the tribe or tribes to consultation. This should be done through formal notice. The notice should contain sufficient information on the topic to be discussed in an accessible language and format, and context for the consultation topic to facilitate meaningful consultation. The date, time, and location of the consultation, as requested by the agency or as developed in consultation with the tribe or tribes. If consulting virtually or by telephone, links to join or register in advance. An explanation of any time constraints known to the agency at that time, such as statutory deadlines. Deadlines for any written comments on the topic, and names and contact information for agency staff who can provide more information. Copies of any information and materials prepared on the subject of the consultation.
Transmit the notice of consultation using the agency's standard method of communication to each affected tribal nation and consider posting it to the agency's website or any centralized federal government site for providing notice of or coordinating tribal consultations. As mentioned previously, provide at least 30 days advance notice. The agency is responsible for ensuring invitations sent to tribal nations are received and to use any available tools, databases, and agency documentation, as well as communication with agency representatives who may be knowledgeable about those tribes and the locations affected by the policy or action with tribal implications, to ensure their invitation efforts are appropriately inclusive. Such efforts should account for the fact that tribes may have connections or legally protected rights to locations and resources beyond their current tribal lands and tribal government offices, such as off-reservation fishing, hunting, gathering, or other rights.
Prepare necessary information and materials to provide appropriate, available information on the subject of the consultation, including, where consistent with applicable law, a proposed agenda, PowerPoint slides, framing paper, and other relevant documents to assist in the consultation process. If it is a regulatory or policy consultation, provide copies of any draft regulation or policy. If this is a joint agency consultation, ensure that communication and coordination has occurred in advance. Determine and secure a method of record keeping in order to accurately capture and reflect comments received. Here, it is recommended that agencies utilize a court reporter to produce a certified transcript of the consultation. Ensure appropriately sized and equipped venues are secured in advance if consultations are conducted in person.
Conducting. During the consultation, federal representatives should recognize and respect tribal self-government and sovereignty, identify and consider tribal treaty rights, reserved rights, and other rights, respect and elevate indigenous knowledge, including cultural norms and practices relevant to such consultations, and meet the responsibilities that arise from the unique legal relationship between the federal government and tribal governments. Agencies should also ensure that federal representatives with the appropriate expertise and decision-making authority regarding the proposed policy or action are present at the consultation. Agency representatives should conduct the consultation in a manner that prioritizes participation of tribal leaders. Closing out. Upon completion of the tribal consultation and written comment period, an agency should timely provide to the affected tribe or tribes the record of the consultation and the decisions made as a result of the consultation. What information the agency should include in the record of consultation was discussed in Module 3. In producing the record of consultation, take measures to protect the confidentiality of any sensitive indigenous knowledge, consistent with tribal direction, and to the fullest extent permitted by the FOIA and other applicable law.
The White House Council on Native American Affairs developed the Tribal Treaty Rights Consultation Best Practices Flowchart. You can find a link to this document, along with other helpful links and information, at BIA.gov, and choose Resources from the Consultations dropdown.
In this module, we covered best practices for conducting a tribal consultation. However, you should work with your agency to determine any specific steps and considerations as you begin to work with tribal nations. You should now be able to identify and describe best practices for planning, preparing, conducting, and closing out a tribal consultation.
Congratulations, you've completed this introductory course. Now you are able to explain the concept of tribal consultation and its importance in the nation-to-nation relationship between the federal government and tribal nations. Summarize the historic and legal foundations underpinning the development and role of tribal consultation today, as well as the executive policy requirements for conducting tribal consultation. Outline the requirements, roles, and responsibilities of agencies when conducting tribal consultations. Identify and describe the best practices for planning, preparing, conducting, and closing out tribal consultations. Identify potential resource locations that may help you to make informed decisions in the tribal consultation process. Now that you have a foundational understanding of the requirements to consult as well as an understanding of the consultation processes and best practices, it is important to note that there are also requirements to consult with Alaska Native corporations and/or the Native Hawaiian community if your agency is undertaking a federal action that may affect these communities.
Through the 2004 Consolidated Appropriations Act, Congress has directed agencies to consult with Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act corporations on the same basis as Indian tribes under Executive Order 13175. Agencies should be aware of this requirement and work directly with Alaska Native corporations to consult on agency actions that may have a direct effect on the corporation's lands, waters, or programs. Agencies should give deference to tribes and Alaska Native corporations on whether they prefer to be consulted jointly or separately on an issue.
Congress expressly requires federal agencies to consult with the Native Hawaiian community under specific statutes such as NAGPRA, Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act, and the Native Hawaiian Healthcare Improvement Act. Congress has also required federal agencies to consult before taking actions that have the potential to significantly affect Native Hawaiian resources, rights, or lands. Congress has also directed federal agencies to work with Native Hawaiian organizations, who are the informal representatives of the Native Hawaiian community. For additional information on consulting with the Native Hawaiian community, please see information available through the Office of Native Hawaiian Relations. Requirement to consult with the Native Hawaiian community. U.S. Department of the Interior, DOI.gov. We hope the information you learned here will serve you well in your federal career. Remember that your work impacts the lives of millions of Americans and members of tribal nations together. We will be known forever by the tracks we leave.